Hashem's Vasai Tiftach, Upiagi Tilasacha. We're now in the final parak of Nechemiah. What could Nechemiah possibly tell us as he's closing the Sefer? And so what we begin with is Bayomahu, on that day. It doesn't say which day. And perhaps Bayomahu Yahashem Achadish Ma'achad. We are not in the day of Mashiach yet. So, but in the days before that, in the coming of Mashiach, meaning when we're still in the Galus, what do we have to read? So the first thing we had that what Bayomahu on that day, Nikra Sefer Moshe. They read from the Sefer of Moshe, meaning they read from the Sefer of Devarim, and we know that the Sefer of Devarim was very instrumental in that it allowed for it's what was read during the time of Hakel when the Jews all gathered together. But it's Moshe, in his last-ditch effort to give the Jewish people what they need, the Musar that they need to be able to go into Eretz Yisrael. Now, on the one hand, that's a positive, they're going to Eretz Yisrael. On the other hand, he recognizes that the relationship between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Bnei Israel is going to change. When we were in the Midbar, when we were in the desert, we had the man, we had the slav, we had the water, we had the anea kavod, we had so many different things that allowed for our lives to be facilitated by nes nistarim, nes guluyim, really open miracles. We lived a life of open miracle. And he writes that last portion of the Sefer Devarim as his musar for when he is not going to be, when there's going to be a time where there's not Hashem, and there's not even Moshe, but there's a ruler. And there's a king, there's a land, there's a whole lot and host of other temptations and difficulties. And so that's really, again, as this is unfolding and as there are difficulties that are being pointed out, Nechemiah points out, what do? You read from Sefer Moshe. Now the first, and Ba'oznei Ha'am, the people have to be listening. So what is it that they're going to read? Lo yavo amoni moavi bekal elokem ad olam. A person cannot marry a male Ammoni or Moabite person. They can never come, not ever. Why? Because they didn't when Bnei Israel were in need of food. B'lechem u'b'mayim v'yiskor alav es bilam l'kalo v'yafoch elokim haklalo l'bracha. So first of all, they didn't give us anything when we asked for it, when we were needy. They refused to be kind and to be considerate. They were also kifoi tova, if you think about it. The only reason that they're around was because Avram Avinu saved Lot, and as a result, these people came from Lot. It was a direct correlation. And if that's the case, that to be kifoi tova, that is just an antithetical midah of the Jewish people. We are Yehudim because we are Hapam Odes Hashem, because we are thankful to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. These people are not only not thankful, but they throw it in our face and they don't help out and they try to curse us. That is not being, where's the gratitude in that one? So as a result, that is what's written. And the question is, after Sancherev, what did he do a long, long time ago before Nebuchadnezzar came in, when he was conquering Eretz Yisrael and all of his lands? Remember what he did. He put different nations all together. So there was this melting pot wherever they went of different nations so that everyone would be kind of weak and no one would know how the language or how to function, and it would be a disaster. But in that, because everyone got mixed up, there was no longer the obvious signs of being part of Ammoni or Moabi. And so for that reason, there was no longer a true prohibition because there was no way to figure it out. However, what is the bottom line here? The bottom line, I believe, that what Nechemiah is really trying to stress is there's going to come a time where we're not going to have the same level of nevuah. We don't have the same level of connection to our religious roots. And so what do these people have to do? First of all, work on your midos. Make sure that you are kind and considerate and thankful for everything that you have. You must separate out the unkindness. Remove it from your midst or you will not survive. And that as a nation survives ki ish echad b'lev echad, because you're all together. And so you cannot mix into our and inculcate into our culture the idea of these poor midos. And so what did they do? Vayiblu kol erev mi-Yisrael. And that's exactly what they do. They separate out. You need to be separated out. We have an understanding that Ezra, all of what in this time period, what the Anshe Knesset Hagedola, they did, Kedushos, Havdalos, we have separations for the purpose of just this reason, which is that we don't want the poor midos to be inculcated into our pure, pristine midos gene pool. Then, so that's the first thing. Midos tovos, have kindness in your heart and thankfulness. And we know that we have thankfulness. We have it in our tefillah. We know that Ezra, he made Shemona Esrei. We have Shevach, Bakasha, and Hoda'ah. We have praise for Hashem, then we ask Hashem for things, and then we thank Hashem for everything. That's all part and parcel of who and what we are about as a nation. Okay, then upon understanding what's going on, he recognizes that there's a problem. The problem is Tovia. Tovia was given a large chamber, or maybe he took it, and he took all of the vessels and the grains and the wine and the oil that were designated for the Levium and the singers and the gatekeepers and the truma of the Kohanim, and he has all of it. And it's terrible. And he explains. So Nechemiah explains, how did this happen? How did it happen that Tovia became so strong and so powerful and is literally taking from the Beis HaMikdash? So he explains, he said, Ki b'shna shloshim u'shtayim la Artashasta melech Babel, bati el hamelach lakayim laketz yamim nishalti min hamelach, that I was called back in the 32nd year of Artashasta, who is not the king of Babel, but actually the king of Paras, but maybe perhaps they're all kind of considered, they're all considered the same kind of in their royalty. And as a result, he came to Yerushalayim in the 20th year of Artashasta. So, and this is in the 32nd year of Artashasta. So, he had been in Yerushalayim for over a period of 12 years. Then he was called back, and then he goes back again. So we don't exactly know the situation in its entirety, but we do understand that while he was gone for that year, unfortunately, Tovia is able to really take over and sneak in, and that is what Eliashib did for Tovia. And he makes him a chamber in the courtyard of in the Chatzrei Beis HaElokim. And it was something vayirali ma'od, and it's horrible. But what is this ledorot? So essentially, when you bring whatever you bring into the sanctity of your home is what creates the sanctity of your home. And so here we have an idea that that what God crept in was Tovia, someone who has bad midos, someone who is a crook, someone who is not good. But he sneaks in because when he's really the Yetzer Hara. When your guard is up, then no one comes in. But what Nechemiah was saying was, I wasn't there, meaning I wasn't concentrating enough. And as a result, this guy took the Kedusha, the sanctity of the Beis HaMikdash, and he takes it away. And what happens when you take away the sanctity of the Beis HaMikdash is that now the Levium and the singers, and who are the singers, and the Kohanim, they don't have the same possessions anymore. Brachas don't come when the house of Hashem is abandoned, and it's abandoned in a bad way. And so, as a result, what did Nechemiah have to do? He had to clean all the chambers, and he was aware that, oh my goodness, there is work to do. All of these things were gone. And so he puts into practice this idea of bringing everybody together. And then all of the people of Yehuda, they give Maser again on the wine, on the grain, and all the Leviim and Kohanim who really, they started to take on other professions because they couldn't do their profession because no one was supporting them. So instead, they're all back. And so Nechemiah appoints to the storehouses people that he can trust. And those people are considered trustworthy, and they help and they give out to everyone else. Now, that is something that is difficult. And when you cleanse yourself from your Yetzer Hara, to be selfish, to do only good for yourself, so whatever it is that you're spending your time otherwise doing, and you're, so to speak, pushing, making sure that you don't push out all of the good and allow into your hearts all of the bad. So what ultimately happens is he asks Hashem, remember me, Zachra li Elokai al zos va'al temach chasidai. Remember all my good deeds. Remember what I'm doing. Meaning, this was a really hard. I was kovesh my yetzer on a public level. There's something to be said about the idea of the cleansing process, and I did it. I cleansed your house. I brought it all back. I brought the mishmar. I did, so please remember me. Now, again, Nechemiah is not looked upon favorably for these remembering bits. That's not part and parcel of what, if anything. And again, tzaddikim are judged way more intensely than we could ever be judged. But the idea really is, that he cleansed the house of Hashem, or he demonstrated how to cleanse your own internal house and not to be bogged down by Yetzer Hara. Subsequent to that, Shabbos. Shabbos highlights that we are different from all the other nations, that our lives are different, our times are different, how we use our time effectively is different, but it's also the quality. You have to allow that Shabbos has to permeate into your life so that it creates Kedusha for everything else. And that's exactly what they did. What used to happen, unfortunately, is that what did you do? What did they do? Well, they brought a dag and a mecher macharim b'Shabbos. They did trade on Shabbos. They traded with their neighbors. They traded with anyone they could trade. They just tried to make the money that they could. Perhaps they needed it because they thought, oh my gosh, there's a famine, horasha, like something that could be done just temporarily. But they didn't. It was not to be highlighted. In fact, they weren't keeping the Shabbos properly. When you keep the Shabbos properly, when you're in Galus, it infuses with you. It does what perhaps Nevuah and Kedusha could have done so many years ago. And that is, it allows for there to be that spark, something that could, impact on our lives. And so Shabbos really is a key element. And so he brings back and he makes sure that not one person is working on Shabbos. He closes the gates on Shabbos, again, metaphorically or physically, to really allow for there to be this amazing revival, and you have to include Shabbos in it. So what they did, Vayaskiru Hadlatzos, so they would close the gates during Shabbos and only open them Achar HaShabbos, and he put guards to make sure that nobody did any sort of trade or did anything on the Shabbos, and he gave them warnings, and he ordered the Leviim to become as pure as possible, in order to be able to Kadesh Yom HaShabbos, to highlight and sanctify the day of a Shabbos, because the day of a Shabbos, whether you are in this generation or if you're in Gullus, it is the kingpin on being able to live the life of a Jew. Okay, then comes intermarriage. And so he doesn't allow, he speaks to them about some of them are from Ubenehem Chatzim Medaber Ashdodis Ve'inam Makirim Ledaber Yehudis. Not only that, people don't know how to speak Jewish language anymore. Meaning, either actually, concretely, people were not speaking the Jewish language anymore. They had assimilated. They were done with it. We're using Persian names of mums even still to today. Or it's not so much that they were that they didn't have the language, but it's just, metaphorically speaking, they were not coming together with one level of words, and they weren't watching the words effectively to really highlight that that you can even do this. You can't mix with the Goyim, and that's exactly what they did. So they separated out. You can't marry any of the daughters and any of the sons, nothing. And in case you thought that you will not withstand, you can withstand the temptation. He mentions Al Elachata Shlomo Melech Yisrael. Even Shlomo, who was the wisest could be, he couldn't rationally handle or do anything with the taiba, the desire, after he had too many wives, and it definitely brought him to a place where he was not as comfortable with in his old age, he really had a difficult time. And so here, that is, please don't, learn from the mistakes of Shlomo HaMelech, and do not, time to separate out. And that's exactly what they did. And they separated out. Then after that, he reinstitutes the kahuna, and to make sure that the Levium, and he all of the foreigners and everyone, he reinstates the watching for the Kohanim and Levium, and the offering of the wood at the designated times, and the Bikurim, and so at the end of all of that, now he's done a lot. So what is that last one representing? That really is representing the infusion of being involved, all of the efforts that you should never think, do not think that it is my hands and my hard work, but rather, what is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what is he praising to Hashem? He's saying, no, we're going to reinstitute those things that it's really all in the hands of Hashem. That the offerings of wood, in its time with the fresh fruit, all of that is really connected to the idea of what he's really trying to get at, which is that we have to do our best in Gullus to make sure that everything that we have is done and used l'shem shamayim. We can have plenty in this world, and it's an amazing thing to have so much, and it's a beautiful thing, and Hashem gives it to us. Every bracha that he gives us, but in Gullus you have to recognize that all of it has to be l'korban ha'etzim. It all has to be as an offering for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the Bikurim represents, it is an offering for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if you put HaKadosh Baruch Hu first in your mundane, in the what you have and what you own, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu rewards, and he has a closeness, and he can reveal himself in a different way. Perhaps not as clear as one might like, but he gives us nevertheless. The Yad of Hashem is always going to be clear if you look for it. And what does he ultimately say? Zachra li Elokai l'tova, please, just remember me for the good. This is the third and final time that he says it. He's not looked upon favorably for thinking about his own self. Please, Hashem, please look for, the positive in my life. And that is an important indictment. But on the other hand, what we're left with is him pleading and caring so much, meaning put in your actions as you're going into Gullus, Doros, but just always have that self-reflection, or have that reflective moment that says, Zochar li Elokai l'tova, Hashem, I'm trying my best, remember me for the good. Hashem, it was a tough day, remember me for the good. Hashem, I need some clarity in the things I'm doing, remember me for the good. If you can hone in on Zachra li Elokai l'tova, just remember me for the good, that conversation that you're having with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is a very strong one, and it allows for us to have this new relationship. We're not going to be as close. We're not going to have nevuah. We're going to have tougher times in life, and if we can just hone in on that which really brings us a level of commitment to our mitzvos, to our Shabbos, to who we marry, to who we bring into our home, to our actions, to what we do with our possessions, then we will weather the storm, and we will make it in Merit Hashem to the Bayis Shlishi, to the HaKadosh Baruch Hu giving us Mashiach b'mheira b'yameinu.